Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the Blessed One, the Worthy One, the Supremely Enlightened One. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Namo Buddhaya. Fellow monks, meritorious lay disciples, we're very fortunate to be living in a time when the Blessed One's Dhamma is so well proclaimed, a time when we have so many of his teachings available to us. We know these are not the teachings of an ordinary teacher. These are the teachings of a fully enlightened Buddha, who has many, many amazing qualities. And of course, one of the best qualities that our great teacher has is this Anuttaro Purisadhamma Sarati, supreme trainer of people to be tamed. When we know how many ways he was able to teach people, we can have a lot of confidence, right? That he can be our teacher as well. When we think about the defilements in our mind, we can know that he overcame all of these same defilements, that he was able to teach other people with these very same defilements how to overcome them. He was able to establish many, many people in confidence in his enlightenment, and through this power help them to attain enlightenment themselves. So one of the great skills that our teacher had was that he knew what to say to people to help them understand this Dhamma. And he knew the right time to say it. So once someone came to the Supreme Buddha and he asked him, would you ever say anything that was disagreeable to someone? Would you ever say something that someone didn't like to hear? And the Supreme Buddha said, well, there's not a simple answer to that question. We can't just say yes or no to that question. Why is this? Because there's many different reasons that something could be agreeable or disagreeable to someone. There's many different factors involved. And whether or not something is agreeable or disagreeable to someone, that's not the most important factor. So we can say things to people that are true, and we can say things that are untrue, right? We can say things that are beneficial for them to hear, and we can say things that are unbeneficial for people to hear. We can say things that help people understand the Dhamma, and we can say things that don't help people to understand the Dhamma. We can say things that help people to improve themselves, improve their lives, and we can say things that just aren't really helpful. And also we can say things that people like to hear, and we can say things that people don't like to hear. And the Supreme Buddha knew exactly how to negotiate these different factors. So if something was untrue and was unwelcome, people didn't like to hear it, and it was unbeneficial, he wouldn't say it, right? Because it's not true and because it's not beneficial. Sometimes something could be true, but it wouldn't help that person. And anyway, they wouldn't like to hear it. So because it's unbeneficial, even though it's true, the Supreme Buddha doesn't teach that. But sometimes things will be true and beneficial, but people won't like to hear, right? Can we see that for ourselves? Does someone ever tell us something that it's true, it'll be helpful for us, but We don't like to hear it. Right? We can even think, in school, like, does anybody like to get a bad grade on a test? Do you like to get your homework back with lots of red marks on it? No, nobody likes that. But if we don't get that information, how are we going to improve? How will we do well at the end of the year on the test? Right? So in this way, we can see for ourselves that sometimes what we really need to hear, we're not really interested in hearing it. But the Supreme Buddha knows the right time to say these things. It's very difficult to know, right, without this extra special knowledge. Sometimes we can think, well, should I say something? Should I not say something? It'll be helpful, but they don't want to hear it, right? So it's very dangerous. Right? The Supreme Buddha said that we should want to help people, right? If we know that they're going to eventually listen, that it will eventually be good for them, right? We just ignore that inconvenience of having it be unwelcome, right? A few unpleasant moments. So the Supreme Buddha also knew that sometimes things could be welcome to a person. They could want to hear things that aren't true, right? Maybe flattery, things that aren't true, but they want to hear it. But the Supreme Buddha doesn't say those things. He only says things that are true. He only says things that are beneficial. And sometimes people do want to hear things that are true and beneficial. And the Supreme Buddha knows the right time to say those things. And why is that? Because the Supreme Buddha has great compassion for beings. He knows that when someone has the capacity to understand, the ability to overcome any resistance, then he should teach to that person. So today we have the opportunity of hearing about some ways that the Supreme Buddha was able to teach people, even though maybe they didn't want to hear. So once there was a Brahmin named Kasibharadvaja. So he was a Brahmin who was also a farmer. So that's what his name is, Kasibharadvaja. Bharadvaja, the plowman, someone who uses a plow. So we'll be learning about growing things today. So have any of you ever done any plowing before? No plowing? Okay. So nowadays, most people don't plow, but everyone eats, right? Do you eat? Have you ever eaten before? Yes, I think so. So do you know where the food comes from that you eat? So some people that aren't very wise, they would say, where does the food come from? It comes from the refrigerator, right? From the kitchen. That's where food comes from. Someone else says, no, it comes from the supermarket. That's where food comes from. But is that really where food comes from? No. All the fruits and vegetables that we eat, all those plants, they have to be grown somewhere. They're grown on a farm. And there's a big process to grow these things. It's not a simple thing. And the first stage in growing things is plowing the field. So right now, if you look at the fields, there's nothing growing in them, right? No plants growing. And over the winter season, the ground is going to pack down and become very hard. And when you want things to grow in the ground has to be soft. It can't be packed down tight. So you take a plow. And nowadays, people have big tractors, right? With lots of plows on them. Lots of things to dig in the earth. So the plow is the tool that people use to dig in the soil. And in the time of the Supreme Buddha, people would have used animals to pull that plow because it's hard work, right? If you just have a small garden, then you can take a shovel and do the plowing yourself. But if you have a huge field, you have to have help. And that's what the animals were for. So there was this Kasibharadvaja. And at this time, he had 500 plows set up. So he wasn't just a small-time farmer. He was a big-time farmer. I mean, think about 500 plows. That's huge fields, right? Many, many animals. Many, many people to guide the animals, to guide the plows. So he was a big-time farmer. He wasn't just a poor, small farmer. He was a big businessman in this way. So one day, the Supreme Buddha, dressed in the morning, he took his bowl and robe, and he went to this farmer, this Kasi Bharadvaja. And on this day, Kasi Bharadvaja had things set up to distribute food. Okay? We don't know exactly why he was distributing the food. Maybe it was for his employees, because you think he has 500 plows. He must have a lot of people working for him. So he had things set up to distribute food to people. So our teacher, the Supreme Buddha, approached Kasi Bharadvaja. And when this farmer saw the Supreme Buddha, he wasn't happy necessarily. Right? He didn't say, "Oh, come, Venerable Sir, there's lots of food here. Please let me give you some food." He didn't say that. This is what he said. "Recluse," right? He didn't call him Venerable Sir, he called him recluse, right? Hermit. "I plow and sow." So we talked about plowing. Do you know what sowing is? That's when you put the seeds in the ground. So that's the next step. The first step is you dig up the soil so it's nice and loose. And then you put seeds in the soil. So this farmer says, "I plow and I sow. And when I have plowed and sowed, then I eat. So because I do this work, I get to eat. You too, ascetic, ought to plow and sow. Then when you have plowed and sown, you will eat." Okay. So does he does he have a pleasant mind about the Supreme Buddha? No. No. He works very hard, which is a good thing, right? He can support his family, can support many people, grows food for a lot of people. But in his mind, people need to work for their food. I'm sure he has many employees, and when they do work, he pays them. And he thinks that that's how everybody should earn their living. He doesn't understand the benefits of this holy life. So he says, he can see that the Supreme Buddha, he's not old, he's not frail, right? He's not disabled. He's a healthy man. So why doesn't he work? Everybody else is working. They work for their food. You should work for your food too. But the Supreme Buddha is very wise, isn't he? He knows exactly what to say. He says, "I too, Brahman, plow and sow. And when I have plowed and sown, I eat." So, what does this mean? Does the Supreme Buddha have a garden outside of his kuti where he grows his vegetables? No. It's something much more important than that. But this Brahmin still doesn't understand. He says, "But we do not see Master Gautama's yoke or plowshare or goad or oxen. So these are all the things that you need to do plowing and growing food." So the yoke is what goes around the neck of the animal. This is a very important part. This is how you attach a cow to a plow, because cows don't come with natural little, loops and hooks that you can just hook things on, right? Like tractors do right now. So you have to have a yoke. It's a big round thing, usually covered with leather, and it goes on the shoulders. You put it over the cow's head, and then the cow can push up against it with its shoulders. So this is the yoke. And this is how the cow is kind of trapped, right? The cow has to pull whatever's attached to it. So he says, "I don't see your yoke or your plow." And the plow is this whole device that's used to dig up the soil. Or plowshare, so the blade of the plow. it's usually made out of metal because the earth is very hard and there's rocks and things. So at the very bottom, it comes together like this, and it's made out of metal, and that's what digs into the soil as it gets pulled along. And he doesn't see the Supreme Buddha's goad. So a goad, that's a fancy word for a stick that you hit your cow with. Because the cow doesn't want to do this, right? The cow just wants to eat some grass. So if you want to get the cow to move, you have to whack it again and again, pretty hard. So you need this stick. And the Brahmin says, I don't see your stick either. Where's your stick? Or even any oxen. No cows to pull this. But yet you say, I too sow, I too plow. I'm also doing this kind of work. And when I plow and sow, then I eat. Then the Brahmin Kasibharadvaja addressed the Blessed One in verse. He says, you claim to be a man who works the plow, but I do not see your plowing. If you're a plowman, answer me, how should we understand your plowing? And this is what the Blessed One says. Faith is the seed, austerity the rain, wisdom my yoke and plow. Shame is the pole, mind the yoke tie, mindfulness my plowshare and goad. So let's think about this. The Supreme Buddha said, faith is my seed, saddha bijam. Faith is my seed. So let's think about a seed. Are seeds very large or are seeds small? Usually they're very small, right? But what happens when you do the right things to a seed? When you plant it in the ground, when you plant it in good soil, when you water it, when you help it to grow, you get something big, right? Maybe even a huge tree. Or in the case of this farmer, a whole field full of rice. Even just from little seeds, you can get something very big. And this seed is essential. When you're eating all your vegetables, you're probably not thinking about that seed. But for farmers, if they don't have the seed, they don't have anything. You can have a plow, you can have oxen, you can have lots and lots of equipment, but if you don't have that seed, you're not getting anything. It's totally useless. If your seeds get destroyed, you can't have anything. There's nothing to harvest. So the Supreme Buddha said, Saddha, that's my seed. So let's think about this. This very important thing. This aspect that's at the beginning of our practice. The Supreme Buddha explained in another sutta how important this saddha is. And he explained the whole process that leads us to full enlightenment through this beginning of saddha. He said, someone who has saddha, someone who has faith in a teacher, will go and see that teacher. If they don't have any saddha, they won't go and see that teacher. They won't begin this process. Without this, the whole thing doesn't happen. Once they visit that teacher, they pay respect to that teacher. So without this visiting, we don't have the paying respect. And without the saddha, we don't even have the visiting. When the person pays respect, then they listen to what this teacher has to say. If they don't have saddha, they won't listen. It starts the process and it continues on, we can see. If we don't have confidence in this teacher, we won't pay attention. We won't listen to these teachings. But because this person listens, they get to hear the Dhamma. And when they hear the Dhamma, they memorize this teaching. So we know how hard memorizing is. If we don't have some confidence that this is a good thing, if we don't have faith, we won't put in the time that it takes to really memorize these teachings. Then when someone has memorized the teachings, they examine it very carefully. Once they have it in their memory, they can look at it anytime. They can think about it throughout the day. And after examining the teachings very carefully, then the person starts to accept. There are things in here that I can see for myself. So after having examined it, by looking at it, a person gains a certain amount of acceptance of the teaching. And once that acceptance has happened, then a lot of enthusiasm comes up. There's a lot of excitement. I found something good here. This is a good way for me to spend my time. And then the person dedicates their time, dedicates their effort to listen, to think about this teaching, to try and put this teaching into practice. Then they look at the teachings very, very carefully. Now that they've thought about them, they can look at them very carefully and weigh things out. And when they've looked at things very carefully, all they want to do is strive very hard to understand these teachings, to put them into practice. And then when someone strives very hard to put these into practice, eventually they realize these teachings, and they can see these teachings by penetrating them with wisdom. But all of this starts with what? It starts with saddha. It begins with saddha. Without the saddha, this process will never begin. It will never get started. So the Supreme Buddha says, this saddha, it's my seed. Right? We can see how even just a small seed grows into something big, something very beneficial. So in the same way, we need to try and cultivate this saddha. We need to make sure that we have this seed and that we take care of this seed very well. The Supreme Buddha said, austerity is the rain. So when you put a seed in the ground, it has to have water. So the Supreme Buddha says, austerity is my rain. So what is this austerity? Do you know what austerity means? So austerity is leading a very simple life, doing without many luxuries. The Supreme Buddha taught many practices for his monks and nuns that encouraged them to lead a very simple life. So he encouraged his monks and nuns to try and live just on alms food, to just go from house to house and accept whatever food it is that people have to offer. To wear just 3 robes, to be satisfied with just a very small amount of clothing, just enough, just what's necessary. To wear robes that are made out of rags. So this isn't it's not a way that most people think about becoming happy, is it? It's not a way that most people think about developing their wholesome qualities. Would any of us have ever thought, I can start this process of purifying my mind by wearing, just castaway clothing. This is what we need the teachings of a Supreme Buddha to help us, because our mind, it doesn't think this way. It thinks, okay, well, I'll be happy when I get some new clothes from the department store, right? Something nice and comfortable. This is how our ordinary mind works. But the Supreme Buddha said that it's this simple life. It's this doing without luxuries that actually helps this seed to grow, that helps this saddha to grow. Wisdom, my yoke and plow. So this wisdom that we're cultivating, trying to understand the Four Noble Truths, it's the yoke and it's the plow. It's what ties everything together and does the work. Shame is the pole. So what is shame? Hiri. It's this sense that we have of right and wrong. It's this aversion that we have to doing bad things. It's this natural feeling that comes up When we think about killing someone, immediately our mind goes, ugh, what a terrible thing, how terrible that would be, right, to kill someone. So for very big things, this hiri is easy to see. But we need to develop our mind. So even with small things, we don't want to do wrong. Even small aspects of the precepts, that we have this aversion to doing bad things, to doing wrong things. Mind, the yoke tie, mindfulness, my plowshare and goad. So let's think about mindfulness and the plowshare. So the plowshare is this part that actually digs into the earth. It breaks up the soil into lots of different pieces. So we can think about the teaching that the Blessed One taught us of mindfulness of the body. Remember, he encouraged us to break this body down into different parts. We can break it down into the elements. We can see the sense bases. We can see all the different organs in the body. Right? This isn't normally how people look at the body. But instead, the Blessed One taught us, break things up into smaller pieces. Look at these aspects. When you look at it in this way, you won't be attached to this body. When it gets sick, when it dies, there won't be that suffering because of that. And the goad, the stick, the mindfulness is the stick. So when we've developed mindfulness, we can use it to keep ourselves back on track. Right? When the mind starts to wander off, we can use this mindfulness to bring it back, to pay attention to what we should be paying attention to. We don't actually use a stick to beat ourselves, right? That's what farmers use. But instead we use this mindfulness to encourage us to get back on the right track. Then the Blessed One says, guarded in body, guarded in speech, controlled in my appetite for food, I use truth as my weeding hook, and gentleness as my unyoking. So he encourages us to protect the precepts, to make sure that we're doing good actions with our body, with our speech. Controlled in appetite for food. So the Blessed One teaches us to take food not for enjoyment, but to sustain this body, to get rid of the hunger that we have, not to always be craving for more and more food. Because no matter how much food we get, if we like delicious food, we always want more and more. And especially for monks and nuns, this can be very, very dangerous. Right? You can spend all your time thinking about food and trying to find tricky ways to get the kind of food that you like. Right? So the Blessed One encouraged us to control this desire that we have for food. And he says, I use truth as my weeding hook. So when you plow up the earth and you plant seeds, actually many things try and grow in the field, not just the seeds we plant, but all sorts of weeds come up, seeds that have spread in from other places, from all the different directions. So the Blessed One says, I use truth as my weeding hook. So a weeding hook would be a long stick with a hook on the end, something to dig out those weeds, right? Because true things and untrue things can come into our mind. So the Blessed One says, truth is what helps us remove these untrue things. The Supreme Buddha says, energy is my beast of burden, carrying me to security from bondage. It goes ahead without stopping, to where, having gone, one does not sorrow. So a beast of burden. Do you know what a beast of burden is? That's the cattle, that's the oxen that's pulling this plow. Because it's really it's that animal that's doing the work. It's very hard work. You can push a plow yourself, but you can't plow a whole field. It's just too difficult. So you need this very strong animal to pull the plow along. Without the pulling, nothing happens. So in the same way, the Supreme Buddha says, virya, energy, is my beast of burden. Energy is what does the work to pull us through, to help break up this hard soil, to get things ready for the seeds to be planted, for the seeds to grow. And it's this energy that carries me to security from bondage. So what's security from bondage? What's bondage? What are we bound to? We're bound to this samsara, yes. And so what's the security from bondage? Where's the safe place that we aren't bound to samsara? Nibbana, yes. It goes ahead without stopping, to where, having gone, one does not sorrow. In such a way this plowing is done, which has the deathless as its fruit. Having finished this work of plowing, one is released from all suffering. So this sort of plowing that the Blessed One does, it doesn't grow rice. What does it grow? It grows the deathless. It grows Nibbana. So if we want to grow Nibbana, then we follow these instructions. We see all the different parts that are necessary. We remember the seed, the saddha, that's so important. We remember the rain. Do you remember what the rain is that has to fall on the seeds? Austerity, right? That this isn't a path that's developed through sensual pleasures, through indulgence in sensual pleasures. So when Kasibharadvaja heard this news, heard how the Blessed One is actually someone who grows things, someone who plows, someone who bears fruit. He says, "Let Master Gotama eat. The worthy is a plowman, since Master Gotama does plowing that has even the deathless as its fruit." So, having heard this farmer is very happy. He knows, I've heard something good. This person, he really does deserve food, because he's doing something even more important than what I'm doing. Right? This work of farmers is very important. Right? We couldn't eat if it wasn't for farmers. But no matter how much food a farmer grows, no matter what kind of food a farmer grows, that sort of food isn't something that helps us put an end to this round of samsara. So this farmer realizes that the Supreme Buddha, even though he doesn't do this physical kind of labor, he still is doing something very important. He's getting a harvest that's even more valuable. So he had food available there that he didn't want to give to the Supreme Buddha. Remember, he said, you should work for your food. And now he's changed his mind, and so he wants to give food to the Blessed One. But this is what the Blessed One says. Food over which verses have been sung is not fit to be eaten by me. This Brahman is not the principle observed by those who see. So he says that food that you want to give just because you've heard me, food that you didn't want to give me, but now you want to give me because you heard me preach, doesn't work that way. I don't eat that kind of food. He says the enlightened ones reject such food, over which verses have been sung. As such a principle exists, O Brahman, this is their rule of conduct. Serve with other food and drink, the consummate one, the great seer, with taints destroyed and remorse stilled. For he is the field for one seeking merit. So the Supreme Buddha says, you need to find other food to feed me. It's good to feed me. He says, when you feed the Sangha, when you feed the Arahants, then you're sowing seeds in a very fertile field, the supreme field of merit for the world. And this made the farmer Kasibharadvaja very happy. And he said, "Magnificent Master Gotama, magnificent Master Gotama. The Dhamma has been made clear in many ways by Master Gotama, as though he were turning upright what had been turned upside down." Right? So we can think about, what was this farmer's attitude before he spoke to the Blessed One? He had things upside down. He thought that the Supreme Buddha wasn't doing anything worthwhile. He didn't think that the Supreme Buddha was a good place to give a gift. As though he were turning upright what had been turned upside down, revealing what was hidden, showing the way to one who was lost. So this farmer couldn't see the kind of plowing and the kind of sowing that the Supreme Buddha was doing. But because of this very special teaching, because the Supreme Buddha knew the right way to teach, he was able to understand. Right? Imagine if some of us went to someone hungry and we were needing food, just standing there peacefully, and the person says, "Get a job, right? Work for your living." What would we do? Maybe we just be very shy. We'd turn around, try to sneak off, right? But that's not what the Supreme Buddha does. He knows when someone has the capacity to understand. Holding up a lamp in the dark for those with eyesight to see forms, I go for refuge to Master Gotama, and to the Dhamma, and to the Bhikkhu Sangha. Let Master Gotama remember me as a lay follower who from today has gone for refuge for life. So now we can listen to another sutta, another example of the Supreme Buddha teaching someone. This is the next sutta in the Samyutta Nikaya, in the Brahmana Samyutta. The sutta is called Udaya. So one day, the Supreme Buddha put on his robe, picked up his bowl, took his outer robe, and he went into Savatthi for alms. And he went to the residence of a certain Brahmin named Udaya. Then this Brahman Udaya took some rice, took some food, and he filled the Blessed One's bowl. Then the Supreme Buddha went back to the monastery and ate his food. So the next day, the Supreme Buddha puts on his robe, takes his bowl, takes his outer robe, and he goes back to this same house. He goes back to this same Brahmin. And again, for a second time, the Brahmin takes food and puts it into the Supreme Buddha's bowl. And the Supreme Buddha goes back to the monastery and eats his food. Then a third time, the third day, the Supreme Buddha puts on his robe, takes his bowl, takes his outer robe, and he goes to this very same Brahmin. And for a third time, this Brahmin takes rice and food and puts it into the Supreme Buddha's bowl. But this third time, the Brahmin has something to say. Does he say, "Thank you for coming. Thank you, Blessed One, for coming and giving me this opportunity to practice dana"? Does he say that? No. This is what he says. He says, "This pesky ascetic Gotama keeps coming again and again." He says, "This monk, this guy, he keeps coming day after day after day. He keeps coming again and again and again." So what would we say? What would we do if we were hungry walking for alms and someone said, "Oh, you keep coming again and again and again," right? We just turn around and be very shy, never go back there again, right? But that's not what our teacher does. This is what the Blessed One says. Again and again they sow the seed. Again and again the sky god sends down rain. Again and again the plowmen plow the field. Again and again grain comes to the realm. And again the mendicants beg. Again and again the donors give. When donors have given again and again they go to heaven. Again and again the dairy folk draw milk. And again the calf goes to its mother. Again and again one wearies and trembles. And again the dolt enters the womb. Again and again one is born and dies. And again they take one to the cemetery. But when one has obtained the path that leads to no more renewed existence, having become broad in wisdom, one is not born again and again. So think how lucky this Brahmin was to hear this teaching, right? So the Brahmin said, again and again this monk comes. And the Supreme Buddha says, yes, there is again and again. So he says, again and again they sow the seed, and again the sky gods send down rain. So if you're a farmer, you have to plant seeds this year, and next year, and the year after, and the year after. Right? There's no end to it. There's no end to it. Again and again, plowmen plow the field, and again, grain comes to the realm. So this ordinary work we have to do again and again. There's no putting an end to it. Even when a farmer dies, then his children, they have to take up the work. They can see that this process has to happen again and again. Again and again the mendicants beg, and again the donors give. When donors have given again and again they go to heaven. So the Supreme Buddha says, yes, these monks and nuns, they come around every single day. And every day donors give. So people are always making merit. And when donors have given again and again, they go to heaven. So the Supreme Buddha encouraged us always to practice giving. He encouraged even giving little bits, that even the smallest amount of food that we give has merit, has benefit for us and benefit for other people. It's very beautiful the way the Blessed One set up this practice, that he encouraged his monks and nuns to go door to door, just accepting whatever it was that people gave. In this way, families could give even just a tiny little bit, even just one spoonful of rice. But by going from house to house, village to village, that the monks and nuns can collect food in a way that doesn't harm anyone. The Blessed One gave a simile of a bee that goes from flower to flower, collecting nectar. So when that bee goes from flower to flower, does it kill the flower? No, it doesn't hurt the flower at all. In fact, as it goes from flower to flower, it collects pollen and spreads pollen all around. So similarly, we can see that the monks and nuns, when they do this, going on alms round, they're spreading goodness around. They're giving people the opportunity to develop wholesome qualities, to practice this generosity, to collect merit. And also, they spread the dhamma around. They spread the teachings around. By having to come in contact with lay people every single day, the Blessed One made sure that those people that wanted to hear the teachings could hear the teachings. They would have the opportunity to develop this relationship with the Sangha. Again and again the dairy folk draw milk. And again the calf goes to its mother. So this ordinary work doesn't stop. You may retire from your job, but this work has to continue on and on. As long as human beings live, they need to eat food. So people have to do this work again and again. It's not very interesting work. Nowadays people talk about being satisfied in their career, right? But especially in the time of the Buddha, all of this work was manual labor. It wasn't exciting work. You couldn't get excited about going to milk the cows, right? It's very boring. You might even get hurt. But people have to do it. So again and again, this work has to be done. Again and again, one wearies and trembles. And again, the dolt enters the womb. So what's a dolt? It's a very stupid person, right? Someone who doesn't have any wisdom. So the Supreme Buddha says, when we don't have wisdom, then we're bound to this samsara. We have to be born again and again. But when we develop wisdom, we can put an end to this round of samsara. Again and again, one is born and dies. And again, they take one to the cemetery. So this is samsara that the Blessed One is talking about. But when one has obtained the path that leads to no more renewed existence, having become broad in wisdom, one is not born again and again. So here the Blessed One is telling us the way out of this problem, the way out of this boring samsara, this work that has to be done all the time, that we don't have any release from. He says, we need to develop the path. We need to develop the Noble Eightfold Path. And through understanding this path, then this is how we can put an end to this long process of samsara. So, this Brahmin was very happy to hear this news. As well, he said, Magnificent Master Gotama, Magnificent Master Gotama. In the same way, you've made clear what was unclear, like someone bringing light into the darkness. So, when he was giving food to the Blessed One the first day, the second day, he probably didn't have a lot of saddha. Maybe it was just a habit for him, right? He thought, well, I'll give alms once, and that'll be enough. Maybe he'll go away. But then the Supreme Buddha kept coming back again and again. And so now he understands what a great opportunity this is to give, because the Blessed One says very clearly that through this giving, again and again, people collect merit, and they're able to go to a good destination, a heavenly realm. In the heavenly realm, do you have to plow a field to get your food? Do you have to sow seeds? No. The heavenly realms work very differently. Whatever you can think about, you get that right away. Whatever kind of food you can imagine, you get to eat that kind of food. So in the heavenly realm, you get this small break from the bad parts of samsara. So you don't have to plow fields. But do beings live in heaven forever? Do you have that vacation forever? No. Summer vacation lasts forever? No. So in the same way, this heavenly birth, it comes to an end as well. So this is why the Blessed One teaches the true end to this samsara. the permanent vacation from this drudgery, from this suffering of samsara. So today we've seen how our great teacher, the Supreme Buddha, he knows the right thing to say. He knows what people need to hear to develop their wisdom. This Kasi Bharadvaja, who thought that people needed to work for their living. They needed to do manual labor in order to eat. The Blessed One taught him the kind of work that monks and nuns do, the kind of work that the Blessed One does, and the fruit that's gained from this kind of work, this most excellent fruit of Nibbana. We learned about all the aspects of this plowing that the Blessed One does. We learned about mindfulness as the stick that draws things, that keeps us going. We learned about mindfulness as the plowshare that breaks up the soil. We learned about the animals that act as energy, right? That energy is what pulls us on. We learned about all these different aspects of cultivating the path in this very beautiful simile of sowing seeds. And we also heard how he was able to tame the mind of this Brahmin who was bent out of shape because the Blessed One kept coming back again and again to get food. So, because of not knowing about this excellent kind of plowing, this excellent kind of sowing seeds, because of not knowing about the benefits of doing merit again and again, and because of not knowing how to put an end to this round of samsara, the path that leads us to the end of this drudgery of life. Because of not knowing these things, we've been born again and again in many bad destinations. So may we keep this teaching in mind. May we keep this simile of the plow in mind. May we reflect on it wisely. May we put these teachings into practice. And through the power of this merit, may we one day realize the Four Noble Truths in this Gautama Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Namo Buddhaya.